Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com and welcome to PhoneDog Live. This is our live show on Ustream. It's a show where I basically talk for an hour about the latest mobile technology news. So don't be surprised whenever I talk for an hour. What a week. This was the week of MWC, so of course there was tons of new devices. We had devices being announced before MWC even started, and so it was a pretty big deal. MWC, of course, being Mobile World Congress, taking place in Barcelona, Spain. And, it's a lot like CES, except obviously it's more focused on mobile. So we saw tons of phones, tablets. Apple still managed to upstage pretty much everyone this week. You guys have probably seen the invitation for the iPad 3, or the event where they're probably going to announce the iPad 3. And so we're going to talk about that and basically analyze the event. And I know that's really, maybe some of you will hate that and find that extremely annoying, but we are going to analyze the invitation just to see if we can get some hints about what we might see at the event. But we're going to go ahead and get started right now with the latest from Mobile World Congress, since there is so much to cover. Guys on Ustream, thanks for watching. I'll be sort of watching the chat sometimes. I don't really pay attention to you guys. I'm sorry, there it is. I just don't. Mostly because, it's hard to talk and read random comments at the same time. And second of all, because you guys don't really stay on topic anyway, so I don't really think you care. Guys on Facebook, I'll be sort of there more towards the end when we do the open Q&A. And then if you're on YouTube watching the recording of this, check out the timeline in the description below this video so you can skip around. And if you don't do that, then it's not my fault. Don't complain to me for the show being an hour long. You can easily skip to whatever topic you want to hear about. But anyway, we're going to get started with lots of news. I want to start with the Sony phones for really no particular reason, just because I want to and I run the show. So Sony announced 3 new phones: the Xperia P, the Xperia U, and the Xperia S. And these are all pretty awesome phones. I have a picture I can show you guys of all of them, all in one nice little picture. Here they are. And so the Xperia, let me see, which one is on the far left? On the far left is the Xperia S. That one has a 4.3-inch display. It's actually an HD display, 720p HD display. It's a reality gap-free display. So basically just all around awesome and beautiful in terms of the display goes. 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon processor. It has a gig of RAM, and it will be shipping with Android 2.3 and, Android 4.0 with Sony Ericsson's UI, 12 megapixel camera, and then the one in the middle there is the Xperia P. That has a 4-inch display, so slightly smaller, but still an awesome resolution, 960 by 540, white magic technology, so supposedly just, really bright basically, and it looks awesome. 1 gigahertz dual-core processor, 8 megapixel camera, captures HD video, again, a gig of RAM, and as far as I know, all of these are going to be shipping with Android 4.0, unless I got the information wrong, but that's what we know for now, unless it's Android 2.3. And then on the far right, you have the Xperia U, which is kind of seems like a mid-range phone, but it's actually not, because this one also has a 1 gigahertz dual-core processor. But in every other respect, it kind of takes the specs down a notch. You've got 512 megabytes of RAM, a 5 megapixel camera that does still capture HD video. The interesting thing about the Xperia U is that you saw at the bottom, there's that kind of transparent band, which actually lights up, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But the little section below that on the Xperia U, you can actually remove that little cap and then replace it with, I think they have 3 different colors. I think pink, white, yellow, maybe black, but I'm not sure. I think it's just pink, white, and yellow. So that's kind of cool. One of the awesome things about these 3 phones is that, despite the spec sheet, the specs for them kind of like getting lesser and lesser with each model, still, even the lowest in model, the Xperia U, is still an awesome phone. I mean, it has a smaller display, 3.5 inch, but it's still a QHD display. And then, like I said, it has a dual core processor. the camera still captures HD video. So that's one of the awesome things about these phones. We don't really have a lot of word on, when they're going to come to the US. We're hearing mid second quarter for the Xperia P, and then we're not really sure about the other two. But definitely awesome, and I think one of the cool things about these phones, and this is like a really just minor thing, but at the same time it's kind of a big deal because it's different. I mentioned the transparent band, how it lights up. It may seem like a small thing, but it adds this sort of fun, interesting design element that's just like, oh wow, that's actually kind of cool. It lights up, and not only that, but it's made to the color that it lights up will match whatever you're looking at on the display. It will match that color. So if you're looking at a picture with a lot of blue in it, it will be blue. If you're looking at a picture with a lot of purple or a lot of yellow or whatever color it is, it'll match that color. And I think even the wallpaper that you choose, like for example, the demo units had a blue wallpaper, and so the light was kind of a light blue. So really interesting. I mean, absolutely no use at all. I mean, I can imagine maybe for different contacts, when they call, you might be able to set it to where, like, if it's your boyfriend or your husband or wife, significant other, it might be a certain color, and then for another person it's a different color. I'm not sure, but I mean, obviously that would be useful. But just, beyond that, and just in terms of having this kind of cool feature that's different that you don't really have on other phones, I think that's really interesting. And we have hands-on videos, by the way, of pretty much every phone device that I'm going to talk about, so you can see them on PhoneDog. But we have hands-on videos with these. I'm not sure if we have all of them, but we do have some hands-on videos. And so they demoed the the changing colors, and it's just kind of cool. Beyond that, the phones are obviously very awesome. The displays are going to be awesome. The white magic display, you can watch the video that Sony has released, and it's supposed to be very sensitive to the lighting conditions that you're in, which isn't really anything different. Phones today, they have a proximity sensor, so if you get kind of close to it, it'll dim a little bit, or if you're outside, or if you're in a room with a lot of bright lights, it'll change automatically. The only thing I'm guessing is that it's either that and they're just hyping it up because they have nothing else to talk about, or it's a little more sensitive, I'm guessing. But that's kind of one cool feature of that. My charging cord just fell, which reminds me I need to plug in my MacBook probably at some point, but I'll do that whenever I need to. So, right, the display. So either way, whatever the light sensitivity is, the display is still going to be awesome because of that technology and then the resolution. And then the Xperia S, full HD display, gap-free reality display. I mean, you can only imagine. This is one of the things that Sony has always done well. And in the past, if you guys watch the video, I've been kind of like wishy-washy on how I feel about Sony, their phones at least. I've always felt like, well, I'll just, continue with what I'm going to say. I've always been kind of wishy-washy, but one thing that they do very well is in terms of the visual experience, and that would include the display and the camera, which makes sense because before, Sony makes great phones and they make great TVs, and so, great cameras and great TVs, and so obviously they're going to have great cameras and, great display on their phones. So, you always have that, and then everything else, the specs or, the internals or the UI, that's kind of, personal preference depending on what you really want, but at least, you're going to get a great camera and you're going to get a great display. But, beyond that, I've talked in the past how I don't really like the Timescape UI. I felt like it was just a little too heavy. And not just heavy in terms of visually, because, one of my favorite UIs is TouchWiz, which is like, I don't know, maybe one of the heaviest UIs out there. It's definitely a lot more refined, but it is definitely a UI that you notice. But, not just heavy in terms of visually, but also it seemed like it slowed down the performance of the device. And there were some parts of it that was just like, yeah, I don't know. To me, that seems like it hindered more than it helped. The widgets, they're full page widgets. They look beautiful. But, to me, like the Twitter widget, where every message is a different card that you have to flip through. If I'm reading Twitter, I just want a list of all the tweets. I'm going to read them. I don't want to have to flip through individually to all these different cards. So to me, like, it looked great, but at the same time, it wasn't very practical. If you look at these hands-on videos, it seems like they've updated the UI a lot and refined it a lot. And I haven't seen a lot of it, but from what I have seen, it looks great. Looks like they've done a lot of great work on it. So those are those two or three phones, the P, the Xperia U, and the Xperia S. Let's move on to the HTC phones. First, let me see what just happened on my phone. Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't anything important. So let's move on to the HTC phones. We had the One S, the One X, and the One V. And I don't know what it is with, like, Xperia has the letters, and then now HTC has the single letters. I don't know if that's starting to become the trend, or maybe it's just easier, because, admittedly, there have been some really weird names. I don't even know how they pick these names. The Resound, what else? The Galaxy. I guess Galaxy I can sort of understand, because you have the wide, broad spectrum of all the devices that fit into one Galaxy. It kind of makes sense. But regardless, the One S, the One X, and the One V. The One V is kind of like a low-end phone, 3.7-inch display, 1 gigahertz processor. Not really that interesting. Obviously it's going to be a decent phone, not to knock the low-end phones, but the ones that people are really interested in are the One S and the One X. Just to note, the One V will be coming to Metro PCS, US Cellular, and Virgin Mobile. And one thing I do want to note about the One V, and then move on to the more exciting phones. One thing I've always appreciated about HTC is that even their low-end phones are good phones. And that's not something you can say about LG, Samsung, Huawei. Of course, Huawei is kind of known for low-end phones, but they do actually make some high-end phones, but their low-end phones are like pieces of crap. But one thing about HTC is that even their low-end phones are still pretty good phones. Going back to the Hero or the Wildfire, still a great phone, even though you compare it to the specs of, another phone that's in the same category. The specs are the same, but the performance is so much better, at least in my experience. Maybe different for other people. So, if you're on Metro PCS, Virgin Mobile, US Cellular, and you're like, all I get is a measly 1V, still look into it, because I think it's still going to be a great phone. But like I said, the ones that everyone is mostly interested in are the One S and the One X. Now, starting with the One S, and then we'll move on to the One X, which is a lot more interesting. But the One S, it is going to be coming to T-Mobile, which is exciting because we don't really hear of a lot of phones coming to T-Mobile anymore. And this has kind of, I guess, always been the story in terms of Android with T-Mobile, is that they don't get a lot of phones, but the ones they do get are generally the best ones. Like Verizon gets just pretty much any phone they can get their hands on, and at&t now is starting to be the same way. They get everything. Whereas with T-Mobile, they don't get that many phones, but the ones they do get are some of the best phones out there. I just repeated the same thing like twice, which I have a tendency to do, but anyway, I have an hour, so what else am I going to fill it with, okay? Anyway, so the One S coming to T-Mobile, it will work on their 42 megabits per second HSPA plus network, and I think I have a picture, actually, that I can show you guys while I'm talking, so you don't have to just look at me the whole time. Here it is, and it has a 4.3-inch QHD Super AMOLED display, 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 processor. It has an 8 megapixel camera with some pretty impressive camera specs here. Apparently you can, let me see, it takes 0.7 seconds to capture it and 0.2 seconds to autofocus. So basically in a second you can go from, just having the phone, boom, camera, snapshot, you're done in basically a second, which is pretty awesome. And it's something that I've noticed a lot of manufacturers are doing today. Nokia, when they demoed their phone, the phone with the 41 megapixel camera, I don't know if you guys saw that, but it was just, seriously, 41 megapixel camera. And the sucky thing is that it's on a Symbian phone, which, I know there's some Symbian, fans out there, but Symbian is just, it's just not, okay, it's just not. And so to put like that awesome camera on that phone just seems like a complete waste. But where was I even going with that? I don't even know. Oh yeah, so they're doing the thing where you can, when when the display is locked, you can just push the camera button and it, goes to the camera. Same thing with this, very quick to get to the camera, which by the way is a feature that Microsoft came up with for Windows Phone, just so you know. So that's definitely an awesome feature, and then the camera itself is very impressive, and it also captures 1080p video. Will have Beats technology, a gig of RAM, Android 4.0 with Sense 4.0, and again, in these hands-on videos that Aaron did, you can get a good look at Sense 4. Actually, they're not calling it 4.0, they're calling it 4. So Sense 4 on top of Android 4.0. And like we've talked about this before, because a while back there was a leaked video of Sense 4 on Android 4.0. And, I talked about it, and it's not really my thing, personally. It's not, I don't really like it visually. I don't really like the way it looks, but obviously not everyone's going to feel that way. So you can watch the video, and it does look kind of, in some ways, a lot different from the previous version of Sense, but in some ways still the same. And I said this before, to me, the UI is so heavy that it doesn't look like Android 4.0. It looks like you're running Android 2.3 with just a new version of HTC Sense. And, what does it matter? You still have Android 4.0 even if it doesn't look like it, so what does it really matter? I don't know. If I have a new version of an OS that has a complete design overhaul, I would like to see some parts of that design overhaul, but I guess if you want that, then just, get stock Android. So anyway, yeah, you can see the hands-on video for what Sense 4 looks like. But definitely, did I show you guys a picture? I did, and that one's coming to T-Mobile in the spring. And it's going to be a pretty awesome phone. Now, the One X is coming to AT&T, and I have a picture of this one too, so you guys can see it. This is on, an ad from AT&T for the One X. But this is it. This is the killer phone. It has a 4.7-inch 1280 by 720 Super LCD display, so extremely crisp and clear. Not only do you have the awesome display technology, but you also have the HD display, the high resolution. And it will have an 8 megapixel camera with the same features of the One S, the quick startup, and then also captures 1080p video. Now here's the interesting thing about the One X and the sort of kind of disappointing feature of it, because I talked about how the One X is really, it's the it device, it's the king, because the international version is going to have a quad-core Tegra 3 processor, which is pretty awesome because, now we're starting to see phones with a quad-core processor. They're starting to become available. Very exciting. The problem is that the AT&T version is going to have it's going to be taken down to a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon processor, which kind of sucks. You go from a quad-core processor to a dual-core processor. With the Galaxy S2, we saw this, when it came to AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, some had the Snapdragon processor, some had the Exynos processor, but at least it was still dual-core processor clocked at, 1.2, 1.5 gigahertz. Now with this, you go from quad-core to dual-core, and I'm not sure if it has something to do with AT&T's network, because it will be an LTE device on AT&T. So I'm guessing it has something to do with the chipset, and that was one of the problems, one of the reasons why the Galaxy S2, you had some with a Snapdragon processor and some with an Exynos processor, some with a TI-OMAP processor. It was because, just certain chips weren't compatible with certain networks. So I'm guessing that's what it is with this. Maybe that quad-core processor just isn't built yet for AT&T's LTE network. Regardless, it sucks, and it's very disappointing. The good news is that there are rumors that the One X will also be coming to T-Mobile, and that it will retain the quad-core processor. So if you're not on obviously if you're on T-Mobile, you can, get it on contract, very simple. If you're on AT&T, you can still get it unlocked, and just pop in your SIM card. I'm assuming it will still work. You might not get LTE, or the data may not be the same, but at least you're still going to get HSPA plus speeds. And you'll still have the quad-core processor. And in a way, I think that's worth it. I mean, would you rather have HSPA plus with a quad-core processor, or LTE with a dual-core processor? I mean, obviously both of them are awesome. I mean, dual-core processors in their current state, they do very well and performance is very smooth, but I just think it'd be worth it to have the quad-core processor. So, but that's just the rumor. I don't think the One X coming to T-Mobile, I don't think that's actually been confirmed, but at least it is still kind of an option. Those are the One S and the One V and the One X. The One X coming to AT&T in the coming months, quote unquote, and the One S, like I said, coming to T-Mobile in spring. So look forward to those. I want to talk about the Asus Padfone, and because I'm very excited about this. I think it's just awesome. I'm probably not going to get one just because, I already have a phone and I already have a tablet, so I don't really need another one. But still, I think it's awesome, and I tweeted about this. It might have been yesterday or something. I want the Asus Padfone. I think it's so just friggin' awesome, just downright awesome. And I have tons of pictures, so I'm going to show you guys the whole spectrum of what this phone tablet thing does. And so you have the phone. Here's a quick picture of the Padfone itself, the phone. And here it is. This actually isn't a good picture of the back because it makes it look kind of like bland and boring. But the back, actually, whenever you see it in person, it has a similar design to the back of the transformer, where it's the metal kind of forms a ring around the camera, and you can only see it in certain light, which is probably why this picture doesn't show it. But here it looks like just a flat matte finish, but it's actually a little more flashy than that. But this is a phone, 4.3-inch Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 960 by 540, so it's a QHD display. It has a dual-core Snapdragon S4 processor, and then its own battery, 1520 milliamp hour battery with Android 4.0. You can see that. But then you also have, here's another picture of the phone if you want to see it. Just, quick picture with Android 4.0. But then you also have the tablet. So here's the Padfone with the tablet. And actually, let me go to a picture where the phone is going into the tablet. I wonder if I have one of those. I do. I'll just go to Padfone in tablet. Sorry, I'm looking through my pictures and I'm just trying to get everything straight. Padfone in tablet. There it is. So you can pop the phone into the tablet. So the tablet does not have a processor. The only thing the tablet has is the display and a battery. So what you do is you pop the phone into the back of the tablet, and then it becomes, like I just showed you, it becomes a tablet. And so it's a ice cream sandwich tablet. It transforms to the tablet UI, which is still ice cream sandwich, and all of your apps transfer over, and everything, works with all of your data. But it looks like a tablet. It doesn't look like a giant phone. It's a tablet UI, and everything is connected over. And then you have that extra battery, 5 times the battery life as a phone, so you can use it as a tablet. But then on top of that, you also have a keyboard dock similar to the iPad transformer. And so this is basically all of it together with the phone, the tablet, and everything. So, you pop in the phone, you've got the tablet, but then you can connect the keyboard and use the keyboard to type or use a touchscreen. I mean, it's all very fascinating and just interesting and awesome. But I think, just the great thing about this is that Asus found a way to connect all of it. And I've had a lot of people kind of skeptical about this, and and saying, well, what about when I plug in the phone, what about my apps? What about the data? I don't think that would work. What if I get a call? I've had a lot of people very skeptical about it, but it seems like all of the questions I've heard are really answered by Asus. There's not as many problems as you would think, and you can see the hands-on videos. They kind of explain basically everything that happens. Like I said, all of your apps transfer over. Now, if it's not an app designed for a tablet, then it would be just like if you had a tablet and you downloaded an app that wasn't made for a tablet. It would display that way, once you transfer from the phone to the tablet, if that makes sense. But I think it's just completely awesome because, not only did Asus find a way to do this, but it actually works. It's not just some cheesy way to connect the phone and the tablet, and then you've got this weird kind of keyboard. It's not like this mutant thing of a phone and a tablet. It actually works very well, and it looks like they've put a lot of thought into it, and I just think it's extremely clever. Obviously, if you're the type of person that uses your tablet and your phone at the same time, obviously you can't really do that. If you do get if your phone is plugged into the tablet or connected to the tablet and you get a call, you can still answer the call you don't have to take out the phone. It'll register on the tablet. It'll tell you, you're getting a call from whoever, and you can answer it. And it comes with a stylus pin, which means you can also write on it. So this tablet is like everything. It's tablet, it's a stylus, it's like the Galaxy Note, it's a phone, it's got the keyboard. It's like basically every mobile device we've ever seen just crammed into one, and it totally works. But anyway, the stylus is also what you talk on, which is a little bit goofy, but if you're not involved in a long conversation, then it wouldn't be too bad. And then the tablet has its own separate battery, and then the keyboard also has its own separate battery. So in terms of battery life, like you should never run out of battery because if all else fails and your phone battery is going low, just plug it into the tablet and it'll charge it. And you don't even have to use it, but just have it plugged in to charge. And then if that battery gets low, just plug it into the keyboard dock, and then it's going to be charging everything. So really, for battery life, it's even more amazing. But I just think it's pretty awesome. The tablet has a 10.1-inch display, and then the keyboard, everything looks a lot like the iPad transformer. So the keyboard dock is basically like that keyboard dock for the iPad transformer. In fact, I wonder if it's the same dock. If you had a dock from the transformer, if you could use that to connect to the tablet for the Padfone. That's actually not a bad question. I would like to know the answer to that. It would save a lot of money. But so yeah, it's basically like that. And then when you close it, it looks very similar to the iPad transformer. But I'm pretty excited about that one. That's probably my favorite item or items to come out of Mobile World Congress. The phone, it's a dual-core processor, not quad-core like a lot of phones that we're seeing. But still, dual-core, that's not shabby. And it's a Snapdragon S4 processor, so it's the most recent generation that we have available. And, it ships with Android 4.0, which I think is excellent. A lot of phones these days are not shipping with Android 4.0. So definitely a plus there. But let's move on. I spent a long time kind of like gushing about that, and I was just like jumping around from picture to picture, and you guys probably got confused, but that's okay. I'm excited about it. I don't care if anyone else is. I'm excited about it. Let's move on to Apple news. And I say this for last. I didn't want to start with it because I know, most of you guys are Android fans, and so I didn't want to start off with the Apple news since there were so many, big Android releases. I felt like that was the most important. But still important, the Apple event for what we're guessing is the iPad 3 announcement event. And we have the invitation, and we're going to just basically break it down. I want to examine this together, and you guys can give me your thoughts, on Ustream. What do you see in this invitation that's kind of like, I wonder if we're going to see this, or I wonder if we're going to see that? Because yesterday I spent literally, over maybe an hour just examining the invitation, kind of looking around at different blogs, different sites, seeing what they had to say or what they found interesting. And if you look at it for that long, you actually do find some very interesting things. Now, maybe it's overanalyzing it and finding things that aren't really clues at all, but, It's just something to do, basically. So here's the invitation, and I'm going to show it for a while, just because, like I said, we are going to be kind of examining this together. So here it is. We've got what really is probably the iPad 3 in this picture. I'm assuming it's not the iPad 2, and one of the reasons why we're pretty sure about this is because it's a very clear picture. If you compare these icons and this text to similar shots of the iPad 2 from, similar range and camera angle, it's very, very crisp. And so this lens, wow, my voice just cracked. That was awesome. Excuse me. This lens credits to the rumors that it will have a Retina display. So this is one thing that we can get from the invitation is that, yes, the iPad 3 will more than likely have a Retina display. That's kind of one of the obvious things. You have the finger pointing on the calendar app with the date of the 7th, the Wednesday, and so this is obviously the event is taking place March 7th, which is a Wednesday. You have the Keynote app to the right of that, which makes sense because it's going to be a keynote address. You have the Maps app to the left of that, which kind of makes people think that Apple may be introducing some sort of Maps application. They've made a couple of acquisitions through the years, in the past, recent years, that will give them the ability to, at some point, have their own Maps service. Now, whether that's going to be now or not, they definitely have the ability to do that. So we may see that. Usually the Maps icon, if it's in an invitation, it points to the location where the event is taking place. In this case, that red dot does not point to the location of the event. Instead, it points to Apple's headquarters. So kind of interesting there. It may not be anything. So this is another thing. We could possibly see a Maps service from Apple, which we know they want to do eventually. Now after that, this is all kind of just my speculation based on what I've seen and kind of what other people have said. First of all, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but those icons are huge. Okay, if you compare this picture to, again, a picture of an iPad 2 and an iPad 2 where a finger is pointing on it, and you relate the size of the icon in relation to, or in proportion to the finger, and then on an iPad 2, the size of the icon proportional to the finger, these icons are huge, and that's a very easy thing to see. Maybe not just from this single picture, but when you compare it, these icons are huge. So that kind of makes me think, first of all, I don't really know what. I don't know if this is just a huge iPad. I mean, 10 inches is already kind of big, so maybe, I don't know, maybe like a 11 or 12 inch display. I don't know. I'm not really sure what that means. But I do know for a fact that the icons are much, much bigger than what we currently see on current models of the iPad 2. Guys on Ustream, what's with the name calling? What happened? We need a moderator. I'm sorry, I forget this all the time. Cameron, you are the moderator, and just delete all of that crap because that's totally unnecessary. Okay, sorry about that. I had to interrupt. If you're on YouTube, you're like, oh my gosh, nobody cares. But anyway, so let's go back to the invitation. So yeah, the giant icons, no idea what that means, but I do want to point that out. They're bigger. So then we go to, there's no home button. Okay, and a lot of people have brought this out, and a lot of people have said, well, it's just in landscape mode, and so that's why there's no home button. First of all, my thing is, why would it be in landscape mode? I mean, what would be the point of that? I mean, in every single picture that we see of the iPad, it's usually in portrait mode, unless there's some reason, like if it's showing the iPad playing a video, or showing the iPad, with some app that's in landscape mode. Usually there's a specific reason why it's in landscape mode. If there's no reason for that, it's always in portrait mode. And also, you guys have probably seen articles from Gizmodo looking at every single detail of the bubbles in the wallpaper and showing, okay, the bubbles are here, and if you compare that to an iPad 2 where those specific bubbles are, then this is definitely in portrait mode. Also comparing the icon spacing. If you get into those details, it looks like this is in portrait mode. So where's the home button? I don't know. Lastly, my thing about the comment, we have something you really have to see and touch. And a lot of people are taking this to mean you really have to see, as in the iPad 3 has a Retina display, and touch as maybe a clue why the home button is missing. So maybe everything is touch now. And I'm going to go back to me, just because I figured you might be tired of looking at the invitation. But this is my theory about that statement. We have something you really have to see and touch. I don't think the C is talking about the iPad 3's Retina display. I think the touch is talking about the iPad, and I think the C is talking about the Apple TV, iTV. I think that's going to be the one more thing. And if you guys watch this show on a regular basis, you know that all of my guesses, all of my speculation, all of my theories have been completely wrong. Basically, every single guess I have made about basically every product that has ever come out has been wrong. So really, take my theory with a grain of salt. But there it is. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm gonna make another guess. I think something you really have to see. I think that's iTV, and touch is the iPad. And this kind of goes to like the larger icons. I don't know if that has something to do with the iTV. Obviously, I don't think the Apple TV is going to have a touchscreen. I think that would be a massive undertaking, and it would probably make the price skyrocket like crazy. I don't really think that's the case, but I think maybe it's not even related, but somehow I'm trying to figure that out. Why are the icons so big? I'm not really sure, but I do have a feeling that we are going to see iTV, that's going to be the one more thing, and then, when it's talking about something you have to touch, I think that's the iPad 3. So those are my theories after examining the invitation for an hour. And it's not really new. A lot of people are guessing that we're going to see Apple TV, not necessarily for the reason I mentioned. I don't think anyone's made the guess based on the reason that I mentioned, but a lot of people are guessing that we're going to see Apple TV. I just recently posted on PhoneDog kind of everything that we know, or everything that we think we know about the iPad 3 in sort of infographic form, just because I thought it would be interesting. So here it is. These are the things that we know, or that we think we know about the iPad 3. And of course, you can check this out on phonedog.com. But as far as we know, it is going to have a Retina display. On the one hand, I would be surprised if it didn't have a Retina display, but on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised, because Apple just, does stuff like that to disappoint us. Resolution of 2048 by 1536. There may be smaller and or larger models, and this may go back to why the icons are so big. Maybe there will be a larger model as well as a smaller model. I've talked about before how I really don't think there's going to be a larger model, just because Apple just doesn't do that with their mobile products. I know obviously the MacBook Pro, the iMac, there are, different size models, but the iPhone has always been one size. The iPad has always been one size. So I kind of don't think they're going to have different sizes, but possibly. Processor, quad core or dual core? We've heard both. We've heard both consistently, so no one really knows. I have no idea. I'm not even going to make a guess about that. Camera, we do know that it has a larger sensor, so possibly an 8-megapixel camera. Larger battery. All of this means that it will be a little bit thicker. We're pretty sure it will be announced on March 7th. I would be completely shocked if it was not announced. But again, that's not even a topic. It's going to be announced on March 7th. Data, probably LTE support. That's what we're hearing. But again, we don't know. And then as far as gaming, it will supposedly have a more powerful GPU. This is kind of an order of like what we're definitely sure about, and then like not so sure about. The Retina display, pretty sure. Quad core, dual core, obviously that's 100% sure, because, your only options are quad core or dual core at this point. 8-megapixel camera, larger sensor, we're pretty sure about that. The only thing, we're not really sure about is just LTE support, and then a more powerful GPU. Siri is also something that I mentioned in the infographic. Siri is a possible new feature, but again, we're not really sure about that. And then, like I have in the corner here, my guess is that the one more thing will be ITV. And so those are my guesses. I may be completely wrong. Like I said, I've been wrong about everything else. But hey, if I were right, that would be pretty cool. I mean, not everyone is guessing ITV, so that would give me some credibility, right? I mean, I got something right. If you guys remember, you probably don't remember this because you don't care about me or any of the projects that I've ever done, but when the original iPad came out, I did a video before it came out, kind of rounding up all of the speculation. Actually, Adriana Lee Delario, if you guys remember her, we both did a video, and I talked about, again, like what we kind of knew about the iPad, what it might be like. I was absolutely wrong about everything, but when I got to the title, there were a couple of rumored names for this tablet, and I don't remember all of them. I don't remember all of them at all, but I remember one of them was iPad. That was one of the names that we had heard before it was announced, and I remember in this video listing off, it could be called this or this or this, or possibly iPad, and then I stopped and I said, dear God, I hope not, because that's the worst name ever. And then lo and behold, it was called iPad. And I never said this, but I remember thinking, okay, of all of these names, it is definitely not going to be iPad. I know that for sure. And then it's named iPad, so I'm like, wow, I was totally off base on that one. But anyway, we'll have to see. But that's my guess. If I'm right, I get, brownie points or something. I don't know. But that's the iPad 3 coming March 7th, which is next Wednesday, which is the day after my 2-year wedding anniversary. Again, I know you guys do not care about that, but I care about that. I will have been married for 2 years on Tuesday, March 6th, which is pretty cool. I think that's it. I was going to talk about something with Windows Phone, I think. Microsoft is... Windows Phone 8 reportedly being tested with dual-core Snapdragon S4 processor. Sprint may be interested. That's the headline. She's super nice. Are you talking about me or are you talking about Adriana? Adriana is really nice. It was funny, like, even though we worked together for, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe less, like, we never talked. And I think that's one of the funny things about working for Phone Dog. Obviously, I love all the guys and we have a great community, but just because we are in remote areas, I rarely talk to Taylor, except for, like, the most I talk to Taylor is during these live shows, is whenever, like, he's leaving comments, and then sometimes we'll talk on Twitter and we'll have a nice conversation, but I don't think Evan, I think Evan I might have talked to, like, a couple of times. Cameron, the only time I talk to him is during these chats. Aaron I talk to most because he's the boss, and so he talks to everybody and gets weekly updates. But I don't know where I was going with that. So yeah, Windows Phone. Possibly Windows Phone 8 will support a dual-core processor. And I know what you're thinking, like, wow, Windows Phone 8 coming out in the summer. By that time, Android phones will have a quad-core processor. A way to keep up with the times, Microsoft. But honestly, for Windows Phone, a dual-core processor is like overkill. That's the word, overkill. That's what I've been trying to say. Every time I bring up this topic, I keep saying it doesn't need it, performs well enough with a single-core processor. But I keep on feeling like that's not saying enough. But overkill, that's the word. A dual-core processor on a Windows Phone device is overkill because it's like too much power. It doesn't need it. Again, I've said this before. When it has a dual-core processor, I will not be complaining and I will buy one. But I'm just saying, even if Android phones at the time have a quad-core processor, in terms of, the numbers may be different, but in terms of performance, it will definitely be able to keep up. So that's the rumor for Windows Phone 8. It could support dual-core processor, at least the Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. So that's it. That's all I have. And my voice just cracked again. That was totally awesome. I love it when that happens. So that's all I wanted to talk about. And you guys, thank you for listening to me for 45 minutes. I know I can be boring. But now it's your turn. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer them. I'm also on Facebook. If there's anybody on Facebook, I don't know. Is there anybody on Facebook? Last week, Sydney completely ignored the comments posted in this section. I say this lightheartedly. Yeah, no, on Facebook, I don't intentionally ignore those comments on Facebook. I just forget because, like, there's some weeks where there's nobody on Facebook, so I'm like, okay, there's no one there, so I'm not gonna look. And then the next week there will be like 10 people there, and I just, the week before there wasn't anybody, so I didn't think to look. But I don't do it on purpose, I promise. It's just, I'm very absent-minded. If you know me at all, I'm very absent-minded. But anyway, so this person actually had a question. This question feels slightly dated now. Do you feel the Razer Max will set the new standard for smartphone battery life, regardless of OS? Yeah, I do. We're actually starting to see more phones with larger batteries, and it's something that they seem to be focusing on more now. Now, obviously, the Razer Max has a very large battery, and we haven't seen that kind of battery in other phones, but they are getting bigger. We're starting to see, 21 milliamp hour batteries, so definitely larger, and I feel like the Razer Max is really what started that. Okay, Ustream questions. Will old Windows Phone devices get Windows Phone 8? If so, when? I have no idea. I'm not sure. My guess would be yeah, but I really don't know. I mean, logically, I would think so, yes, just because every other way, if you look at Android, they all get a couple of updates. If you look at the iPhone, it's supported for a couple of years. So I would assume, yes, they will get Windows Phone 8. But obviously I don't know just because no one's really said anything about it. Sydney, did we see Windows Phone 8 at MWC? No, Microsoft released a preview of Windows 8 for, computers, laptops, tablets, but not Windows Phone 8. Will there be Windows tablets? Yes. Try and keep it to questions only. It's hard to read these things when it's going crazy with comments. All Windows Phone devices will get Windows Phone 8 update. Okay, sure, if somebody said that. Would you take the Padfone over a Windows Phone? Obviously, I would have to try it first. I don't know. I haven't used an ice cream sandwich device as my personal phone, so I can't tell you from experience if I would like it more than Windows Phone. So I would have to try it out. Yeah. Favorite personal device? Well, right now I'm using a BlackBerry, but that's a different story. It's because of a 30-day BlackBerry challenge. But anyway, before that, I was using Windows Phone. I switched from Android to Windows Phone. I was using the HTC HD7, which is not the best Windows phone, but it was the newest one available whenever I switched. So Windows Phone would probably be my favorite OS at the moment, but I mean, that could change at any time. There's a lot of questions about Windows Phone. This is actually very weird. What do you think of Samsung's surplus of tabs? Do you mean surplus as in like extras that they haven't sold, or just surplus as in they're releasing like 1 million of them? Because they literally are. I mean, how many tabs are there? Let me see. Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1, which is basically a tablet. Samsung Galaxy 7.0 Plus, again a tablet. Samsung Galaxy Tab 7.7, Galaxy Tab 2, Galaxy Tab 10.1 to Galaxy Tab 10.1. I mean, there's like a ton of tabs. I think it's overkill. Yeah. What do you think of Google releasing Android 4.0 in months? Not bad. I mean, or Android 5.0, sorry, that was the question. Android 5.0 in months. Not bad. I mean, Android 4.0 was released sometime in, when was that released? Was that this past year, or was that, it was a couple of months ago. It wasn't that long ago, if I remember correctly. I can't believe I don't remember that date, because that's usually, like, the ultimate date for Android fans. But anyway, no, I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it seems like it because we're just now seeing phones with Android 4.0, but it's been out for a while, so Google definitely has the right to release an update, 6 months later. It's up to the manufacturers to keep up with it. What do you make of the Nokia PureView? Yeah, the Nokia PureView is what I was talking about earlier, the phone with with the 41 megapixel camera. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, yeah, the camera probably awesome. Even though, are there even point and shoot cameras, like standalone cameras that are 41 megapixel? I haven't even seen those. So to see that on a phone, it's just like, seriously? I mean, why? But it was going to be a great camera, no denying that. But, I mean, it's going to be a Symbian device, which is just not that popular. I think it's kind of a waste, but how do you feel about the One X and Sense 4? I talked about this earlier, so I won't spend too much time on it. The One X is going to be awesome, definitely. I do wish I talked about how the One X has a quad-core processor, but the at&t version is going to be taken down to a dual-core processor. Kind of upset about that, but Sense 4 looks great. Not really my cup of tea, but I don't think it's bad. It's just, personally, I don't really like it. But Google, Windows... Oh, you're talking to somebody else. I have an iPhone 4S and Nexus S. That's awesome. Good for you. Infuse or Titan? Let me see. You might want to wait for the Titan 2, actually. I don't know if you would want to wait for that. But if I had to pick between those two, it really just depends on which operating system you prefer. I mean, the Infuse has some benefits. If you look, the specs, larger battery, Super AMOLED Plus display. It has, a micro SD card slot, which, Windows Phone devices don't. But really, the bottom line is it comes down to which OS you prefer, and I can't answer that for you. Let me check Facebook while I'm remembering. Okay, answer that question. Samsung was a total disappointment at MWC. Do you prefer Windows or iOS? Both are really smooth UIs, but which one do you prefer? I just prefer Windows, just because iOS to me, I think is a smooth, refined, beautiful, very modern. I do like the look of it, but it's a little too simple. I like having live tiles. I like being able to pin basically anything to my start screen. I like the look of it, the minimalistic, the Metro UI. I like that look more than I like iOS. But that's, personal. Everyone's going to feel differently. P.S. You should totally read the tech behind the 808 PureView's huge camera. It's very interesting. Okay. Kindle Fires are actually more popular than I thought. Awesome. Sydney, is there an app on Android for a Windows Phone style picture unlock? I really don't know. If I had an Android phone, I would do a search for that, but I'm not sure. I know there's a launcher, Launcher 7, I think is what it's called, but I don't think it comes with a picture unlock. I would assume there is an app for that, but like I said, I would have to look it up. Windows Phone and Locker. I guess you're answering that question. Has anyone heard anything about Mozilla bringing out phones? Yeah, there's actually some hands-on videos with Mozilla's new OS. It's an open source OS. I believe it's based on Linux, but you can see some hands-on videos. It's going to be open source, so Mozilla is really saying that, whoever picks it up can add their own UI. So the hands-on video is not really the final product because, the UI is going to be different depending on, what the manufacturer does with it. But you can see that on YouTube. News on Galaxy S3. Yeah, we just got some news that it could be coming in April. And it will have a 4.8-inch 1080p display, ceramic backside. I think that's the latest news that we have. Hey Sydney, I know this is a random question, but if you once had a high-end device, then other devices came out that are high-end, what does that make your phone mid-ranged? It's for a debate, sorry and thanks. That's a very, detailed question. Basically, what is defined as high-end will change. So yeah, if you buy a high-end phone and then a year later, your phone is not high-end anymore, whenever you think about the new the new standard for high-end and mid-range phones. Basically, that answers your question. Oh yeah, that was that good answer. Good job, Sydney. Thank you. Yeah, it's simple, to the point. I like it. My mom has a Kindle Fire. Awesome. Do you think all these companies like Panasonic and Asus that are entering the market are helping customers or making it more confusing? No, I mean, I think Asus is making some awesome products. I think they're helping because the Transformer was wildly successful. I think the Padfone has the potential to do the same. What do you think Windows Phone 7 can do to make it more customizable? Maybe wallpaper background. I know a lot of people would like that. Maybe the live tiles. Maybe I just stuttered. Okay, that was awesome. Maybe being able to have like different sizes. Decide if I want it to be a full tile or just a square tile. Maybe able to resize the tiles or make them like different shapes with like rounded corners. Probably, those kind of things. Why aren't Windows phones so popular yet? Well, I mean, Android and iOS is dominating the market. It's as simple as that. It's just, it's going to take a while for any OS. WebOS failed, had the same problem. BlackBerry is now having the same problem. Still can't add memory or do GPS. That's okay. Okay, I'm not sure what you're talking about. MacBook Pro or MacBook Air? For the average person, I'd say MacBook Air is enough. But I have a MacBook Pro just because I feel it's just better, has more power. MacBook Air is definitely not as lame as it used to be. It's like I said, for the average person who just wants a laptop, definitely MacBook Air is good enough. But just, for what I do, my job, I do a lot of video editing. I just feel like a MacBook Pro is better suited. Will you do an Xbox 360 for a wallpaper in the dog pound? Possibly. I have like 10 wallpapers lined up just because I get so many suggestions. I have a lot of them, already ready to go. Who has more market share, Android or iOS? I believe the latest numbers give Android with the most market share. Now that's kind of like teetering back and forth, but I believe the latest numbers have Android with more. Sydney, what do you think of the Windows 8 preview? I think it looks great. I'm kind of undecided. I think Windows 8 is either the best of both worlds or just a really bad idea. And I was thinking about writing an article on this because you have the UI, the Metro UI with the live tiles. It's just beautiful. You've got the charms. You've got just everything. A tablet UI. It's beautiful. But then behind that, you also have legacy Windows. You can go back to basically a normal desktop like you have now. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. But at the same time, it could just be like a really bad idea because, having the Metro UI is very beautiful, and for a tablet, it's great. But to me, I don't think it's good for, heavy duty working. There's some things where I need a desktop experience. So, but then when you go to a desktop experience, is it really made for a touchscreen? I mean, is it really suited for that? So, the Metro UI has its limitations, but then those limitations are where the desktop experience will excel. But then, the desktop experience has limitations, and then that's where the Metro UI excels. So it's like this back and forth. So it's either like the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds, and I haven't decided yet. Okay, let me check Facebook one last time. What do you think of the Lumia 610? Great mid-range Windows phone. Not really interested in it personally, but, great mid-range Android or Windows phone. What do you think your next phone will be? Well, after this BlackBerry challenge is over, I'm going to go back to my Windows phone device. I'm thinking about doing an iPhone challenge since, I've used iOS. I have experience with it just because of my job. And I've had an iPod Touch. I use a MacBook, but I haven't used an iPhone as my personal device. So I might do that. I'm not saying I will, but I might think about doing an iPhone challenge. Lumia challenge. Oh, that wouldn't be a challenge. I would love to have the Lumia, the 800 or the 900, preferably the 900, but that wouldn't be a challenge at all. That would be awesome. You should. Okay. I might. It's 5 o'clock, which means that I have to go. And I know you guys always get upset because this is actually kind of a short podcast. Whenever you look at other podcasts, they're normally like an hour and a half, or I don't know, maybe 2 hours. But for me, an hour I think is good. We get 15 minutes of Q&A, and I have other work to do, so it's gives me a chance to get onto that. So I'm sorry if I missed your question, but you can send me a message on Twitter at phonedog_Sydney, and I'll try to answer it if I can. Just a note, I don't really check Twitter on the weekends. So if you send me a message on the weekend, I'm probably not going to answer it. Or if you send me a message on Twitter at like 1 o'clock in the morning, also not going to answer that one, just FYI. But I'm going to go now, and I'll see you guys next Friday, same time, same place, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Ustream. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave your comments. I check those, and I try to answer some if I can. But thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.